Hello, everyone. It is Camille. I'm back with another Astro-Bash speaker interview. Today, I am here with Sheri Horn Hasan. Hello, Sheri. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Camille. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I always like to start this by asking for you to give us a little bit of an introduction, how you got started, and if you want to, you can throw your sun, moon, and rising in there as well.
Sure. I am a ninth house Taurus sun, an 11th house Cancer moon, and a Virgo rising. And it's funny because I'd like to tell people the story is that when I was about 14, which is now quite a while ago, I bought myself a book. I went to the mall, which was newly opened then, and went to Walden Books or someplace that no longer exists and bought myself a book about how to calculate your chart. And this, of course, was
Wow.
way back in the 1970s. So it was before the computerized programs existed. And my father was a math and physics professor at a local Wagner College on Staten Island, so part of New York City proper. And he had, when I was about 8, 9, or 10, they built the only other planetarium in New York City proper besides Hayden Planetarium at the time. So he
Wow.
became the director, and he used to take my mother and my brother and I up in the beginning so he could practice with the equipment. And
Yeah.
I started learning about the constellations. He later taught, of course, astronomy and taught courses like how the ancients learned to navigate by the
Mm, mm-hmm.
so initially, I guess that spurred my interest, and he gave me some books on the meanings of the constellations and that kind of thing. He taught me some of the basic constellations like Orion and Cassiopeia, and the Big Dipper, of course, and stuff like that. And at 14, I wanted to cast a chart, but I was probably also in geometry at that point, which, I was fine with algebra. Being the kid of a math professor, that was not my forte. I'm more,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
became an editor, that was my
Mhm.
bread and butter career. So it was the word thing. That was my mother, the words.
Yes.
So I was too reticent, I guess I would say, and perhaps a little afraid of judgment that if I went to my father, because if you're going to like cast a chart, the first thing you do is get a compass and draw a circle, right?
Yes.
I was like, what,
Yeah.
So I never asked him. It all went away when I was probably in early college or late high school. Linda Goodman came out with her book.
Yes.
That was very instrumental and influential for a lot of people around my age range. And, lay dormant. In midlife, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Mm.
And at that point, I had gone for a reading with a local astrologer who taught like a class at the local community college.
Mhm.
And I went for 2 readings, a natal and then a follow-up reading, and she had studied with Stephen Forrest. So I found that a lot of things that she said, and that was just a few months before I get diagnosed.
Mm.
I a year later started studying with her. She was a local teacher where I live in New Jersey. So that really opened up a whole entire new world to me. And I
Wow.
studied first psychological astrology, mostly out of the Liz Green School, and then found my way to Stephen Forrest's apprenticeship program. So between the two, the psychological astrology, my interest in mythology,
Mm.
which to me is the archetypal astrology,
Yes.
then
Yeah.
the psychological astrology, and then the evolutionary just made such good sense to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So
you
it
know,
sounds like you started out being kind of in the lineage of the stars, we can say, and then you revisited it later on in life. And so it came back to you. That's really, really nice.
yeah.
Well, yeah, tell us, it sounds like you practice evolutionary astrology, but tell us a little bit more about what you practice, how you do it, and any benefits that you see from evolutionary astrology in comparison to other ways of doing it.
Well, it's interesting you asked because I just attended Stephen Forrest's program at Omega Institute. I live in New Jersey. I'm originally from New York. I live in New Jersey. And so I was like, wow, I don't have to fly to California.
Wow, yeah, I'm East Coast too.
Oh, are you? Okay. Well, of course, with the pandemic and everything, as soon as I saw him like posted, I was like, I'm there. Even though, I have a master's certification from him. So I was like, God, I need to see the tribe, and I had some friends who wanted to go. So we went. But he said something very interesting. He said something like he thought that the combination of psychological astrology and evolutionary astrology was the best one to have. And he's criticized a little bit the fact that, perhaps psychological astrology is a little bit more about diagnosis, but not necessarily remedy or cure or whatever. So I think the two of them together, because I cut my teeth originally on the psychological astrology, and always resonated to the whole hero's journey. I ended up, as I said, in the editorial side of the publishing industry for most of my career. So that just made such good sense to me. So my mission is to help people grow to move essentially from chaos to clarity through to discover their soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, which is so often not what they think, right?
Yeah.
Because we've been conditioned, and that split between the unconscious and the conscious, just really, I was taken with that right from the very beginning, and how we engage in soul conditioned behavioral patterns that cause us to repeat them over and over again without any thought. So the whole evolutionary teachings and learnings really brought me into that more, as Stephen would say, the more, what's the word, remedy, not just the diagnosis, but also the cure, about how people can get in touch with, again, what's their true purpose. But the other thing that I became fascinated with over the years is psychic energy. We start with intuition, right? And how many people and how many of my clients have been like, they seem to vary between saying, well, yeah, I thought I shouldn't do that, but then I did it anyway, and those who also were like, you're like, you see a moon in the 12th house and you're like, do you have prophetic dreams? Does anyone come into your dreams who's crossed over, or even not crossed over, but tells you, stuff that might happen, and then it happens? And they'll sort of cop to it, but they'll go, doesn't everybody?
Sure.
That's fascinating. So I also love to encourage my clients and others to really, really pay attention through the validation of the chart.
Yes.
Where their intuition lies precisely, and to actually not be afraid of it, to actually embrace it as a gift and an aptitude, and then to allow oneself to use that to kind of bridge that gap between the less, more amorphous, less conscious, I guess, right brain, for lack of a better way to put it, and then bridge the gap to their more left brain, sort of Saturnian, well, I believe this because, or, we do it because my father did it and my father before him did it, and all that kind of traditional stuff. And so much of that is going on in the world today.
Yeah.
I think, the only thing I would add too is that the evolutionary astrology really moves us out of the realm of traditional astrology, which has a lot of very good, valid teachings as basics. But as Stephen would say too, and me being a word person, it's like detriment and, all of these negative terms and the fatalistic. So the biggest thing about evolutionary astrology to me is you're not fated to anything. You'll always have free will. You always have choice. The issue is really getting our minds around the fact that we feel like we don't have a choice.
Yes. Yeah.
We actually do.
Yeah.
Choices should be conscious, even if you want to stay with your old pattern behavior. That's fine.
Yeah.
But understand it. You know what I mean?
You're doing that. Yeah, totally. So I heard you say that you got introduced to the hero's journey through your work in publishing or editing. Were you doing like fiction work? So you were kind of steeped in the stories?
Well, my story is that I cut my teeth. I was a literature major in college. And then when I first came out of school, I got a job, and this is circa 1980, 81. So we're going back a ways, with a very small British-based publishing company. I have a sun opposite Neptune. So I ended up, and my father, believe it or not, was he was one of the youngest World War II vets, and he got
Mm,
drafted into the army when he turned 18 in 1945.
mm,
So he actually enlisted in the Navy, which I always thought was interesting for a sun opposite Neptune, you know.
yes.
And
Yeah.
so I ended up working for a maritime publication. So I cut my teeth in business writing, and I did that for about 15 years. Then I became a marketing manager for Easter seals. I have Neptune in my second house, which oftentimes can be, you know, jobs with that are
Yeah.
less lucrative, you know. And I
Absolutely.
work for that for, you know, people with developmental disabilities. And I have an older brother who is of that population.
Mm,
And then I lucked into a subcontract a few years later, or when I left that job, with a local pair of women who started a women's networking group and who decided to become self-publishers. That
mm.
was circa 2010. So around that time, I got a subcontract with them to edit their anthologies of transformational memoir stories by women. So these are
Wow.
non-fictional memoirs. And I worked with, I did 5 anthologies, 4 of which are Amazon #1 bestsellers. And I worked with about 160 different authors. So the hero's journey, which I learned about mostly like in college and then after college and then studying astrology as well, um, just became so prominent as a way for people to, you know, what I said before is like, we want to understand that our insights and our intuitive capabilities slash psychic are gifts and aptitudes.
Mhm.
So is the hero's journey, where we are the hero,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, and that's a very sun oriented, right? Leonine kind of principle. So to me, everyone is special. And,
Mm,
you know, helping women tell the portions of their stories that they felt, you know, it was important in their development into greater consciousness was like where it was at for me. I
mm,
did edit also a number of full-length manuscripts, which are mostly memoir. I have one that's a small business, how to do social marketing, but it's also back around 2000, like 12 or 13 or 14. So much has changed since then.
yeah.
But, you know, to me, just astrology, should a person choose it as a methodology for growing in consciousness, is such a beautiful tool because you know, you again, I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. I really, you know, I'm a Cancer moon, so I feel it's like
Yes.
we are just all special individuals, and individuating is paramount. You know, it's so key to our actual happiness.
Mm, very true. Very true. Spoken like a true ninth house sun. I relate because I also have that placement.
Oh, do you? Yeah,
I
yeah.
do. I do. So I really relate to the hero's journey and the specialness, right? That's involved in that. It's not just for characters or these larger than life people that we know, but you know, for us as well. So I really like that.
Yours.
Um,
Journey, yeah.
well, yeah. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about what you'll be speaking about at Astro-Bash in I think in
Well,
about a month now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I do, you know, individual chart readings. I started a podcast about 6 years ago called Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. And I used to do interviews with other, you know, hopefully well-known astrologers, you know, and people that I know. Um, and I morphed about a year and a half ago to really doing more mundane and looking at,
Mm,
again, ninth house sun, politics, and the as above, so below, you know, macrocosm, and how we can filter that down to the microcosm of our personal lives,
sure.
assuming it's touching our chart in relevant ways. So to me, you know, there's just so much in that. So I decided, because I also have given lectures and I am a particular fan of Chiron, using
Mm,
Chiron in the chart. And I started looking at the Chiron return that the United States is going through now. So, and I was, of course, as a, you know, a feminist, you know,
mm, mhm,
devastated by the Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court in
yeah.
2022. So I looked back and I looked at the incremental Chiron returns of the US Sibley chart, which is the July 4th chart.
Mhm.
And even if people don't use that, if you use it a couple days apart, it's not going to change your Chiron much or your configuration. So I am doing a short lecture on women's rights in America for equality and the Chiron return that we're really in the middle of. It spans from 2022 to 2025 and will
Wow.
include the US 2024 presidential election.
Mm.
My personal belief that with Uranus in Taurus these past few years, and still another year or two to go, that this change in values has to involve greater reverence for the cycles of the feminine divine.
Mm,
And you
mm.
cannot have reverence for the cycles of the feminine divine if you don't give the feminine divine it by saying, hello, it's
Oh,
women.
yes.
We haven't figured out a way for men to reproduce on their own. So good luck. And when they do, we'll have another conversation. I'll probably be long gone, but whatever. So, women and the reverence for women and their ability to stand up. So I'm going to talk about the different periods of history of the triggering of the Chiron configuration in the Sibley chart and how that's both advanced and set back, occasionally and then advanced.
Yeah.
And I think we have the setback from when the Chiron configuration began to be triggered, but by the end of it, we're going to see women make a huge difference in who
Mm.
in America in particular. So it is obviously a bit skewed to domestic politics, but we just have
That's
we
so
have
interesting.
the news today of the
Oh, no.
Spanish soccer guy who kissed the the
I didn't.
Spaniards won the soccer World Cup or whatever it is. I'm not a soccer fan, so I didn't follow it. And if you Google it, he kissed the captain on the lips. And
Mm.
there's all of this backlash. They're calling for his resignation because,
Really?
well, they're saying it was disrespectful because he just grabbed her by the face and kissed her full on. And she's like, I
Ah,
can give you permission to do that, you know. So there are just so many different interesting things that not only in America, but obviously around the world, that I think
yeah.
this American women can hold the torch up, for the rest of the world. So
Yeah. That's so interesting. I didn't know that America was going through its Chiron return. I was just so focused on the Pluto aspect. So I'm so looking forward to learning a little bit more about that. Thank you.
great.
Well, let people know where they can find you, anything that you have coming up aside from your Astro-Bash speaking, and like where people can get in touch with you.
Okay. Well, I am at karmicevolution.com. My email is Sheri@karmicevolution.com. And you can find out about my readings there. I also have, if you go onto that website, you'll see on the upper right-hand portion of the banner podcast label. And if anyone is interested, you can access my weekly. The show drops on Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern and 11 a.m. Pacific.
Nice.
So, I just keep track of trying to give people first the big picture. One of the things that I have difficulty with too, and this might be the ninth house,
Mm,
energy, is sort of like everybody's so concerned about what's happening tomorrow that they forget
right.
about what happened today. And
Mm,
not all astrological aspects in the sky like dissipate immediately.
yeah.
We're
Yeah.
under so much. So I try to review and then go into, like, right now with all our retrogrades and all that, what is the meaning of that? How can we best navigate it? And, how can we filter that down to, as I said before, our personal lives? So you can find me at karmicevolution.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sheri, for joining us and giving us a little bit of your perspective here. For everyone watching, I want to announce that we have opened live streaming as an option. So if you cannot attend Astro-Bash in person, the second best way would be via live streaming. So go ahead and sign up for that today. Be that as it may, I look forward to meeting you, Sheri, and hearing your talk. And thank you to everyone else for watching this. And hopefully we'll see you there. Bye.
Bye, everyone.